Alright, so today we're going to be answering the question of what did the home mechanic have, say, 40, 50 years ago? What was in their toolbox? What tools were they using? And what spare parts did they decide to keep around? So this toolbox I just got, and all I've done is just clean some stuff and kind of organize it a little bit, but it's all what was in it from the original owner. And it's kind of a time capsule, so we're gonna just take a look at what were they using at the time. What did they need to work on their bikes? And you can already see there's a little bit of some unusual things, some different things that we don't have anymore. So let's just kind of go through it and see what we've got. Alright, starting in the top left here is a set of cone wrenches, which are for adjusting hubs, mostly on old bikes, on cup and cone bikes before everything was cartridge bearing, and they need to be adjusted, and if you keep them adjusted they will last an extremely long time. But you did need these. They're different from normal wrenches. They're very thin, and you can see the common sizes that were in use then and are still the most common ones that are left over today, which are you got your let's see, we got 15 and 13, and the 17 is common now today, but obviously not then. But this is kind of the set of 13 all the way up to 16, and these two are Campagnolo from the Campagnolo Master toolkit, and just look at that finish on them. That's just amazing. It's completely unnecessary. I mean, you look at this third one, I'm not really sure of the maker. I mean, that's an interesting maker mark, but you can see it's just stamped and there's nothing more to it. But these it's not an engraving, but it's something like that. It's beautiful. But these were just completely needed in order to keep your bike in working shape. The bearings wear in and they get loose, or they can sometimes self-tighten. And when you need to replace the grease as well, or the ball bearings, these are just needed to take them apart. On the adjustment theme, which is kind of the major difference between then and now, is that most things were adjustable, and that was just something that you had to do on that theme. I would say with this stuff is bottom bracket adjustment. So this end of this guy is for a big fixed cup on the bottom bracket, the drive side, for undoing that. And then on this side is the hook wrench for the lock ring, and then this is for the inner lock ring. So again, set adjustment, and then jam nut it to keep it where it is, so that from this we can tell that whatever bike this person had, the inner cup had pinholes for a pin spanner like this one, and had a hook lock ring. So it wasn't a like an English style where it was wrench flats on the inner cup. It was pin spanner. That's an interesting little insight. So we've got wheels, bottom bracket, and then this can also be used for bottom bracket lock ring. This adjustable hook spanner, which because back then bikes could have would need hook spanners for bottom brackets or headsets. So this adjustable one just lets you kind of get away with all different sizes of up to, a big bottom bracket to like a small headset. So that's really useful. And this is actually a replacement parts kit for that pin wrench. It's got new pins and then the Allen to replace them. So that would have come with this Sugino, which is Japanese, and so is this one. So we've got Italian and Japanese, and this is English. And for cranks, we've got this Campagnolo. This is for taking out the bolt that holds on the crank arms. So now we know that this person's bike used this type of bottom bracket and was a square taper crank set that needed this to remove the bolts. And continuing on that theme, we know it's square taper because we have this Campagnolo square taper crank extractor. So we actually know quite a little bit about the bikes that this person was working on and what they needed to do. And these freewheel remover tools, this is for, I believe, an old Shimano spline type, and this is the other type. So the interface is basically the opposite of this, like a negative, where it had two negative spots for these square lugs to fit in, and you would turn it, undo, and same with this, be splined. So we know the kind of cassettes that they were working with. And then over here, there's kind of some, on this side here, there's a little bit of different era of tools that I think are interesting. This is what originally caught my eye when I saw this tool set, was this more English, older English tools. These are what multi-tools were like, especially on old English bicycles, kind of, you know, pre-war and post-war. They made them like this for quite a long time, and the way that these were used was, it was kind of every little thing that you would need to use to work on your bike in the field. There's kind of a miniature version kind of rolled into one. So this is a hook spanner for the bottom bracket, like we saw on that one there. And then this size bolt is commonly, that's the size for the seat post binder bolt, so you could adjust your seat height. And then this one is, on my old English bike, is the size for adjusting the brake. And same with this. And then on some that would have a normal hexagonal adjusted headset, this would be for your headset to adjust that. So you could, all in this tool, you could adjust your headset, adjust your bottom bracket, raise and lower your seat, and adjust your brakes. That's all in one. And then these are kind of variations on that, where on one end there are tire levers to help you get your tires on and off. And then this one has spoke wrench flats, so you could work on your wheel. And then the rest of them have all the different sizes that you could possibly need for really any size nut on the bike, because back then it was all regular nuts and bolts. It wasn't like metric Allen head stuff like we have now. And then on the English stuff, there's this Cyclo chain tool, so also made in England. And then it's, I believe, up to a 5-speed chain that this could be used on, because that's, at the time, it was, I think, up to 10 or 12 speed is what they had. And this is kind of, I think, more related to the stuff up here, so not really related with this stuff. This stuff is just older, so for 10 speeds and older. And then a dedicated spoke wrench so that you could put it down on the nipple, and then you have these interesting pins that you could use to give you some more leverage, which is really different than spoke wrenches that you see now. They're normally like a paddle shape or like a U shape. That's kind of cool. That's different. And then this Allen wrench is also Campag. Now a little bit has this knurled piece on it, which kind of gives you some really fine cut control and is very comfortable. And I believe this is a 5 mil, and this is kind of when seat post binder bolts and like brake mounting caliper bolts started to become metric 5 mil, like on my Peugeot PX10 from the 70s. It's 5 mil like that, and then this is a 6, and then white lithium grease. That we saw with these tools to take them apart and adjust them. This is what you would be using to rebuild. And then this, which is, I'm not really sure, it's kind of a mystery, kind of a wax. Not really sure what it's for actually, what kind of grease that is, but presumably it's for another type of bearings. And then this is, it's kind of, the lettering is backwards, but this is monkey hands, which I'll put up what that's for. And then the last kind of little tool we've got up here is this Campag little spanner, and this is for when you're taking off the chain rings on old square tapered cranksets, or even today cranksets. They there's the 5 mil on the one side, and then the nut on the back has 2 little slots in it, and this is what keeps it from spinning. So a very useful tool that survived to today, because most of these tools are really not used anymore, except for on kind of more entry-level bikes. Like square taper is still around, so this and that kind of chain rings are still around, and cup and cone hubs are still around on entry-level bikes, but really on nice bikes today that enthusiasts are riding, most of this stuff is kind of dead-end standards that are, there's nothing wrong with them, it's just standards have changed and priorities have changed. They're not really being used anymore. From what my thinking is that these tools are kind of representing kind of 2 different eras, or 2 different bikes that were being worked on. Mostly up here in this area is kind of like a later 60s, 70s, or 80s era. And then in this corner, I think this is for an English bike that could have been anywhere from before World War II to well after. I mean, the English, just love it or hate it, they kind of didn't change what they were making. So this could have even been up until 70s as well, but I kind of doubt it. But this is kind of stuff that you'd see that would even come with if you bought a Rally or a BSA or Triumph. One of the major bicycle brands, they would often with the bike they would give you a few multi-tools that would go in the tool bag. So that's what I think is going on here. So kind of a later 10-speed era, and then maybe an earlier English 3-speed kind of bikes with Sturmey Archer hubs, and like Cotter cranks, that sort of era. But in general, between these, it really lets you service the whole bike at home. You get to service your hubs, you get to retension your wheels, you get to take apart your bottom brackets, take your cranks off, take your headset apart, take off your chain, install a new chain, which is really all of the things that you really need to do. One nice thing that's in here that I almost forgot about is this original booklet, or a little manual that came with, oops, upside down, that came with this Cyclo English chain tool. So this shows how you're supposed to use it, which is, you know, there really isn't very much to it, but they do provide you with that. And then, you know, just try to make you avoid any problems. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Cyclo Gear Co. Ltd. Crown Works, Baltimore Road, Birmingham. Or Birmingham, excuse me. So that's kind of nice that that's still around for this little tool, which really is in quite good shape. So it's ready for many more years of use. All right, so now we're down to the spare parts that the owner here thought were worth keeping around. So here we have a Continental 27-inch tube. So we know that whatever bike they had was a 27 by 1 3/8 or 1 1/4. So this kind of points to some sort of European or Japanese racer, I would think. It's not really very common over here. So we know that they had a bike with that size, in addition to all those features from all the tools that we know about. And this one's quite cool. This is a light. So it's a light in the front, reflector in the back, and it's battery powered. This little switch here, which I'll test later if it works. It takes, I think, C or D batteries. But it's the type Atouvou in France, so not sure how they would want this. Maybe this is kind of a band that goes around your head or on your bike. I'm not really sure. It's hard. I did a little bit of research and I couldn't really find anything about this, but this is very much a period thing that just isn't around anymore. Alright, so continuing on, we have a complete set of Mafac racer brakes. So that points to something French. So we know European, now we know French bike at some point, we think. These are very common on French racers. So these work where there's a straddle cable that's being pulled and it pulls on opposing arms, that closes the gap there. These are really adjustable, but these were super common at the time. But yeah, real made in France. So presumably these are spares or takeoffs from this person's bike. So this is a rear to the little short bolt, and then this one was a front to go through the fork crown. And then we have pump hoses for, I believe these are both Schrader. So this one, I think, the shorter one, I think, was for a portable. And I don't know, they're both the same length. I'm not really sure because these are quite short for a floor pump, but kind of long for an on-bike pump. So maybe a one of those step-on pumps. I'm not really sure. And they've got interesting fitting on there. So there's two, which is interesting. You know, they seem to have the same Schrader head on them. And then I think, very interestingly, is we have a pair of freewheels, or not cassettes. They're both 5-speed. And if you can read the text, it's Murat Regina GS Corsa. SICC. So either that's French or Italian. Going with the Mafac brakes, I'm gonna guess French. This very much reminds me of my PX10. And then, so this one if I had to guess, this is maybe 25 teeth, biggest cog. And then this one, also 5-speed, but much bigger cogs. And you can see how in good shape these cogs are. See, these old steel freewheels just don't seem to wear out. They just last and last and last. But just looking at the marking in there, it's very hard to read. I think it says Atom B something SG D or 0 something. So an Atom freewheel, I think. And then we can see, if we go back up to our tools, this is the tool for removing that. So, and then on the other one, like I said, those negative cutouts. So same deal here. So these were very much on this person's bike, and they needed to remove them and replace them. So that tells us something. And then back there's a chain. If I had to guess, that was for locking up the bike. Don't really have any other guesses on that. And then here we have a bunch of valves and valve cores. And to me, these look like tubeless motorcycle valves for the most part, which is interesting. Although this one is Presta, but these are clearly tubeless. And it says, this one's the only one that's marked. It says Hardin, made in France. But it's obviously a tubeless valve. It's obviously Presta. But this time bikes weren't tubeless yet, so this must have been, I guess, a motorcycle with a Presta valve, which is interesting. And then there's also 2 Schrader valve core removers, which you could screw on and then keep with you. And then these are the old style Schrader valve cores with the long spring. They don't do that anymore, generally. And then there's some newer ones sprinkled in too. So that's interesting. These are, for the most part, I think these are motorcycle. So this person obviously also liked motorcycles, but kept this with them. And this beautifully vintage Strepsils antiseptic lozenges tin. Tins are great for storing all the parts, and that trend continues to stay. This is just like random nuts and bolts. These are for, I think these are for caliper brakes. The cable goes through them. It's like a cable stop. And I think this is like a reflector mount plate. Spare spoke nipples. These are nickel plated. So that's another little insight there. And we have the skewer, which I think it's got that S mark. I think that's either Simplex or Suntour. Beautifully made. The machining on it is great. It feels really nice. So skewers, all important. And then in the last little tin here, we have brake pads and brake blocks for the Mafac brakes. Jockey wheels for a Suntour derailleur. Bar end plug, and these are interesting. These are cotter pins for cottered English cranksets. I think these are English 9.5 mil. So that these kind of point to that there being another bike that was worked on, an English 3-speed that kind of goes with these. So these are good condition. I don't think these were used. Threads are still good on them. So these were just kept around as spares, just in case. And then this is a big old clip. I've seen smaller ones of these for like holding on cables to the frame, This one's very large. I'll have to look up what this is for. And then the rest, we've got these, got pump pegs, which are marked Alpha 1, which I think is a French company. So a lot of this is pointing to, I think, an English 3-speed and maybe a 1970s French club or sports bike. These are Weinmann, that's a Weinmann pad. And this is just a brass or bronze piece here. I'm not really sure what this is for. It seems like a thumb screw, but I'm not really sure where that would go on a bike. And then there's, I know, here it is. I think this is this goes on the Campag crank arm puller. I think that's a replaceable part for that. But yeah, so that's kind of an overview of what is in a let's say 1970s home bicycle mechanics toolkit. What parts that they thought they needed to keep around for their bike as spares, and what tools they needed to do their work. I think that's an interesting little insight. So just going off the tools and the spare parts, I think, if I were to speculate, I think that this person had a French bike based on the Mafac brakes. It was French, and it had 27-inch wheels. I'm guessing it had a simplex drivetrain. So if I was a betting man, I would guess that these pair of cassettes, this one was for setting up the bike as a maybe for stage racing or doing some kind of sporty stuff, and this was for kind of general I would say touring, actually. For the time, this is a pretty big cog, so I'd say sports and touring setup perhaps on the same bike. That's kind of my theory there.